All right, welcome to episode 4 of The Curious Case of Finland. This is Peter speaking. I'm going to step out of the room in just a minute here, and my brother Sam and my dad Arto are going to take over. These guys are going to carry on through with our themes that we were talking about and tell us about the Winter War.
All right. Hello, everyone.
Hello everyone, my name is Arto, and now we today we are talking about winter wars. 105 days of bloody war in terrible climate conditions.
Yeah, and as my brother said, my name is Sam. I'm Arto's older son. And I can't say that I'm an expert on the Winter War, but I have a little bit of sort of background knowledge on it to kind of the degree that Wikipedia kind of gives you. But I'm sure I'll discover more as this conversation goes on.
Yeah, I'm not swearing. I'm not swearing anything because I am not a historian, neither I try to be a historian. But of course, as I was born in 1957 in Finland, so of course there's these 62 years include some hearsay, the conversation of elderly people and so far and so forth. Of course, then usually around Independence Day, there is lots of articles in newspapers and magazines about certain events and stuff within the Winter War. And I'd like to start with a little bit of kind of give an idea of conditions in 1936, 37, 38 between Finland and Soviet Union. Finland had Finland had a terrible civil war, 1918, and white Finland won, and the rebellion, red troops, red party and communistic party and Reds, they lost. Their elite, most of the movement management escaped to Soviet Union to meet their fellow communists and so far and so forth. It didn't go to a plan, but anyway. That left the country divided, but surprisingly in 20s and 30s, the war was a memory, yes, but for some reason people, by far the majority of people were kind of sick and tired of these extreme movements, which were fighting and hating each other. Communist Party was forbidden. There was no Communist Party. Officially, the Communist Party was in Finnish Communist Party was officially in Moscow, and so there was, and then Finland had a specifically in the west, and west southern Bothnia County was the strongest strong support area for Lapua movement, which was very close to the National Socialistic Party of Germany, but in the middle there was I think the active support and people active in partisan politics was relatively low.
Yeah. From what little I read, the Lapua movement didn't last very long, and they were followed by kind of another far-right party, but they never had a lot of support.
At the top, what I remember, they had 14 members of parliament, at some point 35, 34. But that was, Finnish parliament consists of 200 members of parliament, and at the peak they had 14, so that wasn't much. So they were really the extreme party, and And that represents the political management of Finland. At this point in 30s, General Mannerheim, actually then later on War Marshal or Field Marshal Mannerheim, was away from the country doing other things, but he still was, of course, participating in Finnish politics as a more like at this point more like a historian. And but anyway, he as well as the majority of military and commanders and officers, and not to mention about the men, soldiers, as well as civil population, they were like 80% non-political and absolutely with the present-day Finland and democratically elected parliament. So.
Mm-hmm. And that definitely ties very much into the relations between Finland and the Soviet Union. Like they were politically very different countries, and they didn't have a lot of political or economic interaction, or very high opinions of each other.
Yeah, in Finland, of course, we heard about purges. Stalin's purges, where he killed his own officers, own military officers, and leading politicians, and so everybody was killed or sent to Siberia, some kind of gulag camps, which were some kind of prisoner POW camps or whatever, and then part of them was just killed outright, most without any kind of a court or something, and so and all that was pretty well known in Nordic countries, and Finland had a very, very low relationships, like feelings towards Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. It was we had very little commerce going on between us, practically almost nothing, and the mistrust was by far the prevailing feeling and atmosphere in those relationships. And Finland and Sweden, they had numerous meetings around the border issue. And
so what was the border issue?
Border issue was that, as was one of the last demands of Tsar government 20 years earlier, 22 years earlier, the spearhead of the whole thing was that they wanted they were afraid of Germany, which is, of course, then later on was pretty good vision. So, and they wanted the Finnish-Russian border way further from St. Petersburg, which then was renamed in Communistic Soviet Union. It was renamed Leningrad.
Yeah, definitely. From what I've read, that was kind of the easiest to understand motivation behind Soviet hostility. It's like the Finnish border was literally right next to Leningrad.
32 kilometers.
Yeah, 32 kilometers. So understandably, they were concerned that, a very politically different government was on the other side, who might be allied with their enemies at some point.
Yeah, and even there was some kind of sense in that, because like in the Civil War, Finland Civil War was raging on for its second month, and Finland received 16,000 German troops to help to win. The Germans thought that they came to help Finland to separate itself from Russia, but they actually, when they landed to Finland, they actually saw that they so that they were in the middle of civil war.
Yeah.
And they were invited to Finland and negotiated by whites, and
Yeah, so
they joined whites.
Yeah, so there was this long period of Finnish-German interaction, kind of friendly relations already. So it was not unreasonable for the Soviets to expect that Germany would ally with Finland at some point, and that Finland might become, an invasion route into Leningrad.
I think Stalin and the rest of the management, I think they saw Finland way more Nazistic than it was.
Yeah.
Because communists were forbidden. It was a forbidden party, so there was no communists in Finland. There were only social democrats. And then on the other hand, the extreme right, practically fascists, were existing and totally legal. So this kind of setting kind of gave them the belief that there is a good chance that again German military will land and come through Finland to attack Soviet Union. And God knows, was it justified? It's in some sense it is. It's not justified, but it's not unheard of in that kind of situation that your capital happens to be 30 kilometers away from possible very strong enemy. Finland wasn't that very strong enemy, but Germany was, and so. But anyway, Finland these and they required also they required the border to be pushed about 100 kilometers west.
Yeah, so this was after the war? This was the treaty after the Winter War?
Yeah, but it was before Winter War.
This was during the 30s. The Soviets
they had these negotiations.
They had negotiations, and they
in 37, 38 they had those negotiations, and they had the last meeting with Finnish foreign minister J.K. Paasikivi, and they had the last meetings in 39 October, and the war broke in November 30th.
Yeah, they had meetings right up in.
And their demands were certain land areas up in the north, and in the middle in Salla, and then in the south.
Some of the Gulf islands.
The Lake Ladoga, they wanted Lake Ladoga entirely to be in Russian territory, and then they wanted that critical border between Leningrad and Finland to be about 100 kilometers to west. And then they wanted some islands from the Gulf of Finland. Yeah. 5-6 islands from there to be their military bases and so far and so forth. So the requirements were pretty far gone. It was very strong.
It was a very strong request for sure, or demand, you could say.
And Finland rejected that. So there was no agreement of. Finland made the counter. Yeah,
there was some division. There was some discussion within the Finnish government about the Soviet proposition.
They offered to move the border like about another 30 kilometers, so that Finland still keeps the city of Viborg, which was second biggest city in Finland. So, or it competed with Tampere. They were on the same level. So, but anyway, these negotiations they broke, and both ones, Finland and Sweden, both were stationing military units and equipment on both sides of the eastern border. Mostly I think the center of gravity in military sense was somewhere in Kuopio, Lappeenranta territory, in between, or I would say Mikkeli, Lappeenranta, which is about like, I would say 200 kilometers, a bit less than that. But anyway, that was, I think, most of the war machine was stationed around there, and then south of that.
Yeah. My understanding is that the battle on the Karelian Isthmus on the west side, or kind of the southwest side of Lake Ladoga, that was a somewhat traditional military engagement with kind of fortifications, the Mannerheim line on the Finnish side, and the Soviets able to use their tank forces and kind of make a mass advance on that front. But then the terrain north of Lake Ladoga was harder, and there were fewer roads, and there was more swamp and forest areas, and that turned into more of a guerrilla war. There were fewer defenders on the Finnish side, and the Soviets were able to make more progress early on, but then got bogged down into these guerrilla engagements where, units were encircled by Finnish guerrilla troops.
And and one of those became Battle of Rate. Became super famous. There was it was like as said, there was, as my son, some said, there was very few roads, and of course they were gravel roads and narrow, and so they were not road network was very poor. So, and lots of swamps, as Sansa said. So the proceeding with tanks was very, very difficult. They had to use very narrow channels to get the tanks to the front, and then the winter was extremely bad. So it was temperatures down to -40, -45, and so it was like terribly icy war. And Finnish troops, although we had in the beginning specifically we had a shortage of arms, but we were like climate-wise, we were way better prepared than the Soviets.
Yeah, to a lot of people that might sound surprising. It's like you would expect Russians to be well prepared for the winter, and kind of one of the common conceptions of World War II in general is that the Russians were much more prepared for the winter than the Germans. But in this case, it was the Finns who were much better prepared than the Russians.
Yeah, has it passed your eyes that why was that? Because one would think that a Russian up in the north they can survive winters just as Finns can.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I have a full picture of it. I mean, you have to, of course, remember that Russia is a huge country, and they were sending troops from various parts of the country, and not all of them experience the same kinds of winters that you get at the latitude of Finland.
And specifically northeastern Finland, that is, it's bad. It's really bad.
Yeah, but I think the biggest factor was just really bad planning, just bad logistics and planning. It's like the officer corps was reduced to a fraction of the original numbers because of the purges, and a lot of the kind of politically minded, people replacing them just weren't very competent in their jobs, frankly.
They had a poor training, that's true, and the trained like Sam referred to Stalin's purges. That's true. He pretty much sent to Siberia or killed 2/3 of his officers, trained officers who had experience, and also that is true that Russia at the time Soviet Union is a huge country, so they had in the Finnish front they had Georgians, Azerbaijans, South Ukrainians. They had people from all kinds of climates, and of course that kind of harsh climate, and then I think the shortage of good trained officers was also a thing. They anyway, all these end up in a some of relatively poor preparations, clothing, ammo, and the logistics and all that. So they were not on the level of Finland. Finnish guys were very, very prepared to the harsh winter.
I mean, the one area where the Soviets did have a huge advantage was in in tanks and planes and artillery. So they had the weaponry to a completely different degree than Finland did. Like Finland barely had any tanks in an operational sense.
Some
Especially-
tens of tanks against Soviet Union's 2,000 tanks.
Yeah, exactly. It was a massive disparity between those forces, and it's really surprising that it appears to have made so little difference, at least early in the Winter War. It's like the Soviets had these enormous artillery barrages where they could, just shell the Finnish line for days and days on end, and they could advance with hundreds of tanks at a time. And still the Finns were able to hold those lines.
And in first two waves we actually kicked them back. So
Yeah.
And that was we were tougher soldiers, absolutely, and the management style and the strategy and especially tactical preparedness, tactical methodology was from 1800 something, early 1800, and that the war. The officers what they had were poorly trained, and they didn't have really at the time like they used so old tactics that it was with modern tactics and arms it wasn't as difficult as it could have been. So Finland was able to fight against an in numbers overpowered enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, in the long run that started to, of course, show. Then, of course, but in the beginning that looked good, and so.
Yeah.
And then, of course, sometimes our tactics were because we had practically no tanks. They had an abundance of tanks,
and we didn't have many anti-tank weapons either.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an also thing. Our anti-tank and the anti-tank things were like a 3-foot piece of lumber and a bottle of gas, Molotov cocktail. So we put the lumber piece what they stuck in between the tracks of the tank, and then another guy climbed to the tower behind the tower and opened the gate, opened the hatch and throw the Molotov cocktail in. So, but that really happens. It sounds funny, but that we used that kind of super manual tactics because we didn't know anything. We didn't have anything.
Yeah,
but still we did it.
Still, it worked. Yeah, it's like you can overcome tanks with very low technology.
And it really worked. The Battle of Rate was that they Finnish troops, they very well knew by their reconnaissance that the Russians are coming along a specific road.
Yeah.
And when they have crossed the Finnish border, the relatively small number of Finnish soldiers cut the road back, and then they didn't know that, but it was just to secure that they can run back, and then from both sides of the road, Finnish troops, guerrilla troops, attacked them and they shot them till the last man. So and they killed, and they had it was I don't remember the numbers, but it was 8-1.
Yeah.
For Russians, the numbers, and then they had tanks, and they couldn't use tanks in the situation where they were totally encircled in.
They were just stuck on that one road.
Onto the one road, and they couldn't even turn a tank. It was so narrow road that they couldn't even turn that. So, and minus 40-degree weather. So that was a massacre from Finland, in positive sense. So they were nailed right in there. So they didn't have no place to go. Finnish soldiers, guerrilla soldiers were on every single 4 directions, and Finland in that battle, it kind of turned turned to Finland in a way that, like, we didn't have anti-tank weapons. But in this case it was good because we had to stop those tanks and kill the guys inside. So we got the tank, and we got lots of tanks and trucks, absolutely, many trucks, and artillery pieces. So that was pretty profitable for Finnish troops.
Yeah, I mean that was definitely a major feature of the war, just capturing Soviet equipment.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah,
It's like
absolutely.
the Finns to a pretty significant extent made up for their kind of material disadvantages by capturing Soviet material. It's like they used the same caliber of bullets, so they could use the same ammunition, and they could of course use the Soviet artillery.
Yeah, that was even a basic personal arm, rifle. The rifles were the same chamber to the same caliber, 7.62. What was it, 54?
Mm-hmm.
So it was they were compatible, and so they could. That was lots of guns. We got lots of our guns from Russians, and so that was that type of battles. There was numerous of comparably
Mm-hmm.
similar, and then we had quite frequent. We had more snipers than and Russians, and they say that one of Finnish snipers, Simo Häyhä,
Yeah.
is the all-time leader in sniper. There is I think it's somehow verified.
Yeah, I think they kept a pretty reliable count of his shots.
There is more than 500, like
Mm-hmm.
506, 509, somewhere there. Russians, what that guy killed from
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of snow and real backcountry.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I read a little bit about Simo Häyhä, and it's quite incredible to the lengths that he went just to stay hidden. That was like the whole ball game, obviously, for a sniper, is to make sure no one sees where you are.
Mm,
And
yeah,
he
of
would
course.
like put snow into his mouth to kind of cover up his breath. So
Yeah,
he's-
when you blow through an icy mouthful of snow, you don't breathe. Yeah, there is no steam.
yeah.
You can't see the out put out the air in steam. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was, and they say that it is the Winter War is called as a miracle or some kind of and not only in a battle power, battle will, defense will
Mm.
of Finnish, but also because the same country had 22 years only. The 21 years ago had a civil war, so but
Yeah.
it
So yeah,
was
they unified
amazing.
they recovered and unified enough in that time.
They unified against the common enemy,
Mm-hmm.
and sure they did that. It was amazing. It was amazing. Yeah. So have you something to add to the war, active war events or something?
I mean, one thing that occurred to me was kind of the difference between kind of camouflage approaches. It's like on the one hand, the Finns didn't necessarily have a ton of uniforms to go around, but they did recognize the importance of hiding in winter terrain. So they had white clothing, they had white capes, white cloaks.
White overalls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were well hidden in the snow, while the Russians took a long time to get any winter camouflage. They were just dressed in khakis and olive colored tanks and whatnot. So they were very easy to spot, and that was a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
That made a huge difference. It's like, how do you shoot something you can't see?
As well, Finnish units, many of those guerrilla units, and they were the guys who were from that area. They before the war they lived in that area, and so they knew the area like their own pockets. Which was not, Russians didn't have that benefit because there was very little even villages. Of course, it was countryside in Finland too, but there was not even villages. It was pretty much backcountry and wilderness, and so very few Russians knew the terrain and hills and valleys and stuff in there. So, but Finland has definitely had an overpower in local landscape knowledge, and that was. So should we skip to the end result, or and then the effects and events? What happened then?
I mean, yeah, I don't think we've covered too much the kind of the second wave of the Soviet offensive. Like this is the I would say the first 2 months of the war where Finland was holding really well and even pushing back and having these major victories like in the Battle of Rate Road. But then there was a kind of realization within the Soviet hierarchy that what they were doing wasn't working, and they brought in a lot more troops. They reorganized. They brought in new commanders. And then they did start pushing into the finish line, still at massive losses, still very much, favoring the wins in terms of, the ratio of casualties. But the Soviets just had so many people, so many men to push to the front that they did start making inroads.
For the top commanders like Stalin and his people under the commanders under him, I think it was more or less a strategy that we will go by power if nothing.
Yeah.
If we have 500,000 men and they have 200,000 or 150,000, we will go by power. We will push them back whatever comes, and that's what then actually happened. So, of course, there's a limit how far and how long you can fight against overpowering enemy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just comparing the sizes of the countries, there was little limit to how much force the Soviet Union could deploy. They could be absolutely overwhelming on the scale of Finland.
Yeah, in everything, in material and manpower. It is kind of, I've always wondered how fast in Second World War, because as Finland was, so was Soviet Union, an by far agricultural country, but they really propped up their metal industry to make arms. They really had a huge enemy German army in the European Eastern Front and so far, but they had like endless amount of material. Planes, tanks, artillery, rocket launchers, everything. So.
Yeah. Soviet industry was quite formidable.
Yeah, it was, and they were able, even in the middle of war years, they were able to step it up a lot. And so it has been said that as a continental powerhouse militarily, Soviet Union is by far was made because of Second World War. Then they had to put
for sure.
had to put their military industries to work and work hard.
So how did Finland and the Soviets finally move towards peace?
It was of course it was initiated from the Finland side, and not that Russia didn't want. They would rather go to fight Germans in the south. So
yeah, the Soviets had limited aims. It doesn't seem likely that they ever wanted to take over the entire country.
Yeah, I think the moment, the peak moment when it was clear that the immense overpower
Mm.
what Soviet Union had and used. It was Finland had to start negotiating the peace,
Mm.
but then neither Stalin he didn't have really. I think he didn't have any use for Finland.
Yeah.
So and it would have taken some months to and maybe 100,000, 200,000 men, but there was no that much reason to take Finland, and I think he planned to make some peace with Finland, and so that then Finland would stay calm in there
Mm-hmm.
and serve their benefits and so.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely seems like the main thing Stalin wanted was to just secure that Karelian border in kind of two ways: to have the border itself, a little bit further from Leningrad, so that there was a little bit more of a buffer zone, and then to have a little bit more compliance from the Finnish government, so that they didn't seem, quite as threatening.
Yeah, that they beat us so badly in the last phases of the war that so. And of course, let's remember that the Operation Barbarossa
Mm.
hadn't yet begun.
Yeah, of course.
So they had men, but then when, of course, later in 1941, when Operation Barbarossa started, then of course they needed every single man
Mm-hmm.
in the Eastern Europe. So.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, the peace negotiations, they were, very much started by Finland. And
Yeah.
Finland was going through Stockholm in order to speak to Moscow.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and I think the negotiations went on for a few months
Yeah,
before it finally ended.
and with and very we got the agreement. Somewhere, do you remember what time?
Yeah, it was in March. March
Yeah.
13, I think. Was
March 13. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it was really a winter war. It was Finnish winter is exactly November, December, January, April, March. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But they were hefty requirements. What Soviet Union.
Yeah.
They wanted a huge piece of Karelia, and the border was pushed back, not only from Leningrad, but also they wanted Vyborg.
Yeah, they pushed all the way past Vyborg.
And
So they got a major city from Finland.
and they took those islands in the Finnish Gulf. They took the very northern parts like Petsamo and Salla. They took those also. In Petsamo, Finland lost a very important harbor city. I don't remember what was the name of that, but anyway, it was a full year old. It had a in those latitudes. It's very important to have open water, year-round open water harbors.
Mm-hmm.
And that city had that, and it was a very important transportation route to not only for Finns but also for Swedish. And but anyway, they took that whole area from the northeast,
Mm-hmm.
and so they were, and then they wanted Hankoniemi, about 100 kilometers west from Helsinki. They wanted a 50-year lease on that so that they can put their radio stations and the military base in Hankoniemi. And so they were, and then of course and then more or less the I don't know how it went. Did they dictate our government kind of the government members? Or I don't think they really did that yet. It will become after the continuation war, but. For this one, I think they didn't dictate more than, but they wanted these areas.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Finland had many choices at that point. They were clearly losing the war. So I think the terms were very much set by the Soviet Union,
Yeah, sure.
and Finland didn't have that much say. I mean, of course, there is some limit to what Finland could accept, but yeah, I don't think Finland made any counteroffers.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. These were a bit more than the model before the war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were asking for. I mean, they were asking for significantly more than before the war.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, which is
understandable, of course.
understandable. Yeah, at least the war was for something.
Mm.
All the war victims, all the huge troops numbers and all that, of course. So that at least in the war you got something at least for that. So. Okay, so I think we wrap this up, and then from March till somewhere in the what was the continuation war?
Yeah, the peace after the Winter War lasted for about 15 months.
15 months.
Yeah, before Operation Barbarossa started.
Okay, 1941. Operation Barbarossa started in 1941. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so then we'll start looking at Operation Barbarossa and finish kind of thought that as a payback in 1941.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks for listening.
Yeah, look forward to it. Yeah, my brother will be taking over for the next episode, and thank you all for listening.